Hey folks, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on wherever you are. Welcome to the Continuous Testing Meetup. Today we have our August event where we're gonna have a very good and interesting talk from Vitaly. And we hope you all have a good and interesting meetup and you take something away from this to you that you can apply in your daily life or at work, or you can share this with a friend or colleague. Before moving forward, we just want to thank our sponsors. We want to thank Trendic. We want to thank TUI. We want to thank SOS Labs for the different pieces of the infrastructure they give us. Some of them help with paying the meetup. Some of them help with paying with the Zoom link. Some others help us with uploading the video to YouTube and editing it so it just looks nice. So you can share that with friends or colleagues. So yeah, basically a big thank you to all you. We know that we have several events, one per month at least, and if by any coincidence you have missed an event, one of the previous ones we have had, you can always go to continuoustestingmeetup.com and you will find there all the events that we have had in the previous months and years. And most of them will have the recording. So if you are interested in checking what we have done in the past, just go there. There is a search box as well. You can check the different events and you can share the video with friends or colleagues. So let's move forward to the topic of today. We're gonna have Vitaly talking to us. He's gonna show us a very interesting talk about QA for processes, starting from the beginning with hiring. I hope you all get something interesting from this talk. One important thing that I want to mention before continuing and giving the floor to Vitaly is that if you have questions, it'd be nice if you can write them on the chat so we can collect them all and then we'll read them at the end. And it's also important that if you have any disagreements with the content of the talk, if you have a different perspective, you can also share that. It's not only about questioning, but also about sharing your own thoughts, sharing what you think. And if you have a different perspective, different thought, we are very open and looking forward to hear your different thoughts and perspectives. And if you have questions, please write them down in the chat and we are gonna go through them all the way until the end of the talk. Having said that, thank you, Vitaly, for being here, for taking the time to share your insights with us. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so you can share yours. And again, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diego. Thanks for inviting me again. I already gave one talk here, and this is my second one, if I remember correctly. But Aurelian, please correct me if it's third, but I think it's second. Anyway, let's proceed. So my talk is called QA for Processes, and this is, I hope, the first talk in the series of talks about this idea that processes can have bugs, processes can be tested, processes can be improved. And I want to start this whole discussion with hiring. So a few words about me first. I have more than 23 years of experience in IT. I started doing JavaScript development back in 2000 and 2001 when Internet Explorer 5.5 was still a thing. I did 13 years of development. Then I became a QA engineer and an engineering mentor. Now I am a developer advocate. I also consider myself to be a quality enthusiast. I really dislike when companies give us, sell us, provide us with products of bad quality. I believe that our world and we deserve products of better quality. I also love animals, dogs and cats. I support a shelter in Georgia, where I used to live. And there is a link to my GitHub. With that said, so why am I presenting this talk about hiring and improving hiring? First, I believe that hiring is very important because nothing spoils your work atmosphere worse than spending time at work with bad people. And we might, as engineers, just participate in hiring, like interview someone. Maybe we are invited as a mentor for a newbie, for a new joiner to the team. And from what I heard from hundreds of engineers, is that hiring is broken. I don't think that hiring is broken, but I think that hiring is painful for everyone. And I also believe that QA and engineering practices can be applied to hiring. And I will explain my idea further. So first, I want to present you with a very, very, very really simplified flow of a feature development, of any development at work. When we develop a feature, first what happens is there is some signal. Let's say the product manager decides that users need a certain functionality, or you as a team together with the product manager decide that clients need certain functionality, or maybe marketing people. It doesn't really matter who decides, but there is a signal coming to development that certain functionality has to be built, has to be coded. The first stage after that signal is gathering and compiling and coming up with requirements, what this feature consists of, what it should do and how it should behave. Then we proceed to development, of course. We develop the feature. Then in most companies, as if I am a developer, I have to pass my feature to a code review, or I do a developer test myself. I just test this feature to see if it works. And then I pass it on to testing. And if testers don't find any issues, the feature gets deployed to production. I think that as there are two feedback cycles here, one with code review or dev test, and one with testing. And by feedback cycle, I mean that if I, the developer, pass a feature to code of the feature for someone to review, the reviewer might say no. The reviewer might come up with comments and ideas on how to improve the code of the feature, because the reviewer thought that I did the feature in some bad way, let's say. Same goes with testing. Whenever a tester sees that the feature is not complete, or the feature is malfunctioning, or even worse, breaking some other features or the product altogether, tester returns the feature for us, the developers, to work on it again. So code review and testing here basically are inspection and verification. During code review, I inspect, or the reviewer inspects the code, and during testing, tester inspects and verifies that the feature works according to requirements. And so if verification on any of these stages fails, we developers rework, we fix the feature. And in hiring, the flow, I would say, is pretty similar if we have a bird's eye view of it. There is a signal. Let's say a manager decides that the team does not have enough power, is not fast enough, or the team decides that they need certain specialists within the team, and this specialist has to be hired. And upon having this signal, the team or the manager, whoever, people decide on the requirements for the person. These requirements are put then in the job description. Then there is this phase of finding candidates whom we think, or recruiters think, whoever is finding the candidate, whom we think that will match the requirements. Then there is the interview phase, where interviewer or interviewers, multiple interviewers, test if this candidate matches the requirements. If the candidate, they want to have some confidence during the interview phase that the candidate will be good for the team. Then there is hiring. So the person, if they pass the interview, they are hired and they are put on probation period. And if the probation period is all right, then the person continues working and everything is good. And as we see here, we have also two feedback cycles, at least two. One feedback cycle, if the person does not pass the interview, we have to find another one. Or if the person does not pass the probation, we have to find another one. So we still have rework to do. And with that, I always ask a question: how many returns and how much rework is okay for you? If I am the reviewer, if I am reviewing the code that someone passed to me, and if I see that the first time code is doing something wrong, is just bad code, I return it back to the person who wrote it. Then if I have another case like that, if the person says they fixed the code, but then passes the code back to review, and I still see the code is bad, I'm kind of worried. But if this happens 5 times in a row, if the person keeps submitting code which doesn't work, I think that's a bit too much. I think I would be worried that the person doesn't know how to write code. He wasn't, or she wasn't trained well, or maybe they misunderstood the requirements, or maybe something else. So it would worry anyone if the person who passes the code for you to review would have passed bad code 5 times in a row. But then when we have 5 candidates rejected for a position, let's say a first candidate comes to our interview, and we say, nah, the candidate is no good. We interview them, and we see the person does not fit our requirements. Then the second person comes to the interview. We see the same situation, and third and fourth and fifth. But what happens usually is we just proceed interviewing more and more people, hoping to find the candidate who will fit the requirements, who will satisfy the requirements. To me, it sounds kind of crazy, because in both cases, when someone passes malfunctioning code 5 times to code review, and when we're interviewing 5 different people, one after another, it's the same verification, same approach. The verification fails 5 times in a row. And if we see this situation, I would say that something is really wrong in the process, but something is really wrong before the verification. So again, if I see that the person brings malfunctioning code for me to review during the code review stage 5 times in a row, I would think twice if the person is capable of writing code. I would mentor him or her. I would talk to them. I would check the requirements. I would check if I'm verifying what I should verify. So I would be really worried what happened before the code review. And I think we should be really worried what happens before the interview if we see 5 candidates failing the interview one after another. So I'm showing you 2 flows once again. They're really, really similar. And we need to understand where this earlier stage is. Well, in development, there are 2 stages before code review, 2 main stages. First one is when requirements are composed. Second one, when the development is done. So if the requirements were misunderstood by the developer, let's say, the developer would write something which no one wants, which no one needs. And of course, code review would fail them. And if the developer doesn't know how to write code, maybe they understood the requirements well, but they just don't know how to write code. Of course, the development would fail. Development stage would fail, and they would be passing us bad code onto review. Similar situation is with hiring. If we have 5 candidates failing the interview, then it's either the requirements were bad, I mean, we formulated the requirements in the wrong way, or the process of finding candidates is bad. And what can we do about it? In QA, there are multiple approaches to help with these issues. First one, which is quite popular now, and I'm happy for that, is the approach of shift left testing, where the testing stages occur much before the development and during the development. So the first thing to think about is the requirements stage. We should answer the question to ourselves if we are sure that we are trying to find the right person. In development requirements testing, in development and QA, requirements testing is very useful and very simple to implement. You get a QA, you get a developer, and you get a product manager, or two developers, doesn't matter. You get a few people to talk about the requirements before the development starts. QA might come up with definition, with acceptance tests, with acceptance criteria before the development is done. And those acceptance criteria would help the developer develop the code in the right way. A developer might come up with ideas on how to do things better or how to change the requirements. And so if agreement is reached before the development on what it is we are to develop, on what the requirements are, there are lower chances that the development phase will fail. Similar thing with hiring. Requirements can be really well tested. First, if I am the hiring manager, and if I want to hire, let's say, a front-end developer to the team, and I already have a front-end developer in the team, it makes perfect sense for me to talk to that front-end developer and present them with my requirements and ask them, do you think, my dear friend developer, do you think that I've written good requirements? Or maybe I'm missing something, or maybe I'm putting too much there. I can even try to match my developer, the developer on the team, and the requirements, kind of understand if the developer satisfies those requirements or not. So this is the validation against the existing team members. If I am hiring the first front-end developer for the team, and if I don't have any expertise on the team in front-end development, I can ask in my network, I can ask if those requirements that I came up with, like, let's say, technical stack requirements, experience requirements, whatever, if they make sense. Any engineer and any hiring manager, any manager and any engineer has a significant network of ex-colleagues, friends, and community members of various communities they participate in. So there is a way to validate your requirements for sanity with everyone. And again, if we validate the requirements, chances are that we will be finding better candidates, because it's absolutely the same as with feature development. If we understand the requirements well, we will do coding better. So if we understand the requirements and validate the requirements for the candidate well, we will find better candidates. Next one is quite controversial, quite strange, quite bizarre. I call it verify the verification. So basically, we need to answer ourselves our own question: if the verification process, if the interview process works well, how do we do that? Well, first, in test automation, there is a thesis which I particularly like. It says that flaky tests are worse than no tests. Why so? I had one experience where there was a huge test coverage. There were more than 1,000 tests for a product, and 200 of them were flaky, meaning that sometimes they work, sometimes they fail. What this flakiness gave us is very little. We didn't get any good value out of that because we could not rely on them. And if we relied on them, we didn't know if they actually were testing the right thing. So flakiness in tests is usually a bad thing. And I would say that I see that most interviews are quite flaky. What I mean here is that people have the requirements. People then find some candidates whom they think might match those requirements. And then they test those people, they interview those people using interview practices copied from other companies, like from Google, from Amazon, from Facebook. I see so many big tech companies doing this approach. They just say, okay, you have 5 stages of algorithmic questions interviews, and you have to pass them all. And I always have a question. Do you think, dear manager, that these interviews actually test for what you want them to test? Or maybe they test for something that you do not need. But this is theory. In practice, it's very simple to validate if your interview process is good or bad. If you're hiring another engineer, let's say you're hiring another front-end developer to your team, ask your existing front-end developer to pass your interviews. And if they pass your interviews, it means that the interviews are good enough. If they don't pass your interviews, maybe your interviews are too hard. Maybe you're raising the bar too hard, and maybe you will not be able to quickly source a good candidate. But that's a question that you have to answer for yourself. You have to confirm that your testing, your verification, that your interviews are actually testing the candidates for what you need. So if your requirements for the position do not have, let us say, PostgreSQL knowledge, and you somehow ask people for PostgreSQL knowledge during the interview because you think that it's a good thing to have, a good experience, a good knowledge to have, maybe you're doing a bad favor for yourself. It's up to you to decide. But again, you have to make sure that your verification, your interview process is stable. I love this story. It's a bit of a side story about Oracle. On this QR code, you will have the link to Y Combinator article written by a guy who worked at Oracle. And he tells a story that the database code, the code of the very database, consists of 25 million lines of C code. And of course, the context of the product is high risk. They cannot risk that any single client of Oracle would have a database corruption or would have a database stopping at some point for no reason. So they have to focus on getting as little bugs as possible, as few bugs as possible. But this guy says that the code base is an unimaginable horror. He talks about how many flags they have in the code for particular weird behaviors. Read the article, it's very interesting. And he says that any touch, like if he wants to touch the code to fix a bug or do something else, it takes him from 2 to 8 weeks to get his bug fix committed to the repo. Why so? They have a very stringent testing process. They test here and there on multiple server farms with automated tests, with manual testing. They do a crazy load of testing. But they only do testing. They don't do QA. They don't improve the quality from the onset. I would say that if they did some proper refactoring during the product life cycle, because Oracle is very old, it's a very old product. But if they did some proper refactoring during those ages, maybe they wouldn't have this unimaginable horror in a code base, because testing only finds defects. It doesn't improve the system. You have to improve the system when the testing and verification found a defect. So why I'm telling you this story? Because Oracle has excessive testing. Their testing suite is so good, it's so well done, it's so good that they do not have a proper motivation to improve the code quality in the first place. Why? Like, okay, let's hire, they currently have 10,000 people working on Oracle database. Maybe they can hire another 10,000 people if they want to move faster. They don't need to improve the code. They don't have the motivation to improve the code because testing finds all the defects. And yet as the guy says, it takes from 2 to 8 weeks to apply any change to the database, to the database repo. And if I ask anyone how much time it takes you to hire someone, usually people say from 3 weeks to 2 months, sometimes even 6 months. This kind of resembles me, the story of Oracle. The people whom it takes so long to hire candidates, they have multiple interview stages. So on this picture, I showed only 4 stages of the interview. In many companies, it's 5, 7, and even 10 stages of interview. And of course, it takes ages. Of course, it takes a month or more to hire a person. But I have a question here. If issues are found on the 4th interview stage, what did the first 3 do? Why couldn't we find those issues on the first 3? Usually interviews are split so that one interview tests for, let's say, system design, another interview tests for architecture, another interview tests for algorithmic knowledge, another interview tests for soft skills with an HR, another interview tests for something else. And this spans across weeks and weeks. Maybe, just maybe, this is excessive testing. Maybe we could test the candidate's knowledge and skills during 2 stages of interview or 1 stage of interview. Maybe we could make it longer. Maybe we could make it a test day where the person would work in a mob ensemble scenario with the team and show all their knowledge and skills which are needed. And in my experience, candidates are all happy when I offer them to participate in a testing day and work in an ensemble programming way, rather than to have a span of a month of interviews. But again, if we know that we need those 4 stages of interviews, and if we still believe we need to specialize, like 1 system design, 1 algorithm, but maybe if we have to test so much, maybe the finding candidates process was bad. So again, remember, if you have 5 code review stages or 5 testing stages, and you think they're all important, and you know that they are finding issues, maybe you coded the feature in a bad way. Maybe your people need, or you need more training in software development. And in this particular scenario, maybe, just maybe, we should improve finding candidates process rather than rely on excessive testing like that. If you are sure, like very, very simple rule of thumb, if you worked with a person for 5 years closely, like in one team, say you are a front-end developer and the person was a front-end developer as well, you worked with that person for 5 years together, you know their skill, right? So if you were to hire that person, to find that person, to bring them as the candidate, would you need 4 stages of the interview? I guess not. And knowing someone, I would say, improves finding candidates a lot. That is why I always recommend looking in your network when you have to find someone, when you have to source a candidate. So what do we want in software development when we have this process? Ideally, we want to understand the requirements, to code the feature, to pass it to code review. The reviewer in our ideal world would say, job done, very good, very well. Pass it to testing. The tester says, all good, all done, testing complete, pass it to production. This would allow us to quickly develop features, right? And I would say that hiring has the same ideal scenario. In the ideal world, we formulate the requirements, we find the first candidate whom we think will satisfy those requirements. We interview them and we hire them. They pass the probation and they work for a long time for us. How do we approach it? Similarly to coding. So if we want our code to be written in a better way, we need constant training. We can also employ pair programming or mob programming, ensemble programming. We can do a lot to improve how we code things. In coding, we also need to test the requirements. We need to understand what it is that we are building. And we need to improve our testing, of course, in coding. So here in hiring, it's pretty much the same. First, we need to understand whom we are looking for, the requirements. We need to validate them against our team, against our network. Think better if the requirements make sense. Then we need to test the finding process, the channels where we find people. Maybe, just maybe, finding them from network will be much better than finding them from LinkedIn or somewhere else. Maybe, just maybe, it's better to ask your fellow colleagues to recommend someone with whom they worked for a long time somewhere else. And then, of course, we need to test our verification process, test if we understand if we do not do excessive testing there, because developers generally prefer companies which can hire them without lengthy interviews, but hire them quickly. And if we can reduce this excessiveness of interviews, excessiveness of tests, we have to improve the process too. So do those three things: test the requirements, improve the requirements, improve the finding process, and improve the interviews. And with that, I am done. There are two QR codes here. One is the newsletter that I am curating with my colleague, and one is my LinkedIn. And questions will be answered.
Thank you, Vitaly. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I was just writing coincidentally a moment ago. If anyone has a question, you all can write it down in the chat. Or if you are also willing, you can also unmute your microphone and ask the question directly. Well, someone comes and does that. I was thinking like there was a part we were talking about this, like the cycle of the interview paired with the cycle of the tests, and then I was wondering if you had to go through the cycle several times, you were thinking like, are we looking for the right person? Like, are we listing the right sort of skills? And I just want to think it from the other side, like, because sometimes I get messages in LinkedIn, like people asking, like, "Hey, like, do you have like a job offer for me? Like, do you know where I can apply?" And then it's like, I go and check their LinkedIn, and the skills they list are very
Oh,
few.
yeah.
They are not like expressing anything, so they don't show
Yeah.
what they have done in their professional life. So,
Mhm.
so one thing is that we put the list of things on the job requirements, but also like what would you recommend to people who are looking for something, but like their skill set is not really expressing all
Yeah.
these skills, like, so thinking it from the other side, like, so they
Thank you.
cannot
Very good question.
achieve those
I love
skills.
this. I love this question. I love, like, there is a huge problem generally in our industry. First, companies rarely really understand whom they want to hire, and the same goes for candidates. Candidates rarely understand how to, as you rightfully say, present their skills and how to search for companies which would feed them. Because many of my friends apply to all the possible companies, and I can never understand the rationale behind it. Well, unless the person is really hungry and needs a job right now. But if you are on the job market and if you want to find a company where you can work for a longer period of time, maybe you should put more effort in understanding what it is you like in the company and what it is that you want to do. But then answering your question exactly is, I would say that presentation of skills is hard. General presentation of skills, the presentation for everyone on the market, for all the companies, is even harder because companies have very different approaches of filtering. Some recruiters just filter you out if they see a certain pattern in your resume, in your CV. And it is, I would say, it is almost impossible to write a list of skills that would, to present your list of skills in a certain way so that it will attract all the recruiters or many recruiters. My advice usually is to have first to compile a big list of companies, let's say 50 or 100 companies, which you think are okay, then explore a bit more and make a short list of, let's say, 10 companies. And for each of the companies, present your skills in a way which matches their job descriptions, but of course, without lying. So, for example, I have a very strong sports background. I did professional swimming. I did lots of contact sports like fighting sports, etc. I have a very strong sports background. If I apply for a company, let's say, which produces fitness trackers, bracelets, I would certainly put my sports experience in the CV, right? I mean, it makes sense. It would attract them. They would understand that I can be dog fooding the product better. I could PR the product better and market the product better in my blog posts or somewhere else. But if I am applying to a university, and if I want to work as a teacher, maybe I shouldn't list my sporting skills there. So, of course, you have to present your core skills and your core experience. And there is a good advice there to try to think in terms of quantitative information, like how much you did. I know it's very hard to quantify how many projects you did because you rarely do projects on your own. You usually participate in a teamwork, right? But still, recruiters and hiring managers generally value more quantitative data than qualitative data. But I believe that LinkedIn, unfortunately, isn't the best place to look for work and look for candidates. There is a great study done by Akerlof. He was studying markets in the US, and he was talking about the principle called asymmetry of information. When I am looking, let's say, at your profile on LinkedIn, I do not know how much it is, how much truth you have there. And when you're looking at my company profile, you do not know how much truth there is on the public place like LinkedIn, right? So we have a huge asymmetry of information. We do not understand each other well. I always recommend to find someone who works in a company. So if you're a candidate and you want to apply, let's say you wanted to apply to our company if we had open positions, I would recommend to talk to me, ask me, Vitaly, what do front-end people do at your company? And I would tell you that they do this, and that. There are cultural things at our company, there are process things about in our company, this and that. So I would provide details. And I never had rejections. I never had any engineer reject me when I ask such a question. So when I applied to, what was it? I can't remember. I applied to some company 5 years ago, and before doing so, I talked to 3 people from that company. 2 worked there, and 1 was fired from that company. I composed a profile. I call it a profile of a company, where I try to understand what is acceptable in the company, what is rewarded within the company, and what is not acceptable in the company. And then I try to match this profile to me. And then I try to think if this company is a good fit for me.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't know. At least in my case, I try to improve my profile every now and then, but the positions I've gotten have never been through LinkedIn. It's always through some connection. And often it has happened, it's someone who I met in a meetup, for example. So I know we're doing this virtually, but there are meetups happening in person in different parts of the world. So at least my recommendation is that people should go and attend the meetups they can attend in person, because that's how usually you can get those connections created.
I
Looking
fully
forward to that.
support what you're saying. I've been organizing meetups for the last 2 years, and before that, I presented multiple, maybe 50 or more talks at various conferences. The effect of networking is enormous. If you But like when you are an engineer and you are thinking about you're strategically thinking about your career, like where do I want to be in 5 years, whom I want to become in 5 years, the investment in networking, I would say, pays off better than any investment in any hard skill. If you just start devoting time to participating in communities, especially, as you rightfully said, live communities, where you come and you can touch the person, you can talk to the person. This bonds you much better. People remember you much better when they drink tea or beer with you. And when something happens, it will click in their brain. Oh, I have the position for this guy. I can recommend him. And it works really, really well. So communication is key.
Definitely. Yeah. Does anyone else have a question for Vitaly? I am taking most of the time, but I really wish someone else has a different opinion. We are having at least, yeah, like 6, 7 people who have been listening actively. So I wonder if any of you have a question for Vitaly or a comment, or maybe you disagree with something Vitaly said.
I may have one for Vitaly, which is about what you said about trying to find not after the first candidate, trying to find from the first one, right? Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. So I have myself work not as a recruiter, but I try to recruit for my team, and I have a bit of experience, good and bad, and I have to say that, in my opinion, you can define well what you need. You can better define at the beginning what you need, but then we are talking about people. And you said before, on LinkedIn, on resume, people could say, I know this, I know that. And so at the end, in my opinion, you can only know if it's good or not, or if he or she is good or not when you meet, when you ask. And even with this, sometimes you think he or she is good, and you will find after 3 months he isn't or she isn't. So our question is, are you really sure that this is really possible, always possible with people?
I would say I always try to think about the ideal system. The ideal system takes almost zero resources and provides lots of value, right? Even when we're building features from the product standpoint, we want to build something really cheap, which brings us lots of what? Wow, my chair broke. Sorry, folks. Wow, that was fun. Okay, so from the product standpoint, we want to build something really cheap, which brings lots of value. Same with hiring. Ideally, we would like to have just one person coming to the interview and fitting the position, right? This won't happen. As you fairly said, we need to make mistakes to learn. We need to understand if maybe our interview process was bad. Maybe we can find it only later. So, there is a proverb that every doctor has their own cemetery, and every hiring manager has his own or her own list of failures, I would say, where you hire someone who doesn't fit the team, or where you skip the person or reject the person, and then you realize, that person was just great. Someone works with them now. So mistakes will happen. What I'm trying to say is that we should try to aim to stay optimal. If I work with a person, like I hired more than 30 people in the following way. I worked with a person on one project or another project for a couple of years or 3 years. I know them really well. Then a startup comes to me and says, Vitaly, we're building this particular project. We need we have this particular culture, and we need this specific kind of a person. And it clicks in my head, aha, I know, Anna will be this person. And I hire Anna, they interview her, and everything is fine. I hired more than 30 people like that. It always worked. So if you think, if you reflect upon who the people are with whom you're working, this is a great human capital. I'm not sure how to even call it. I had people who quit working for me, and then I rehired those people 7 years later for a different company. But I was a good manager for them, and everything was fine. And I knew that these people were just great for this new position. So the human thing is the most important one. And also what is important, that hiring managers rarely approach candidates who failed the interview, very rarely approach. Usually they say, a recruiter will provide you with the feedback. And recruiters are usually so overloaded that they never reply. We're all being ghosted by recruiters, every single one of them. I have yet to see at least one engineer who always had replies and feedback from the interviews he failed or she failed. So I always advise hiring managers to do the extra stuff. So if the candidate is rejected, if you reject the candidate at the interview, go talk to that person, email them, LinkedIn message them, do something to add this extra little human touch. And you can be candid about the thing. Well, unless there are certain laws. In certain companies, there are laws that you cannot reject a candidate with a certain level of experience. But if you have to consult with legal team, of course. But if you can provide candidate feedback, please provide candidate feedback. It is investment in your human capital. Because then, in 10 years' time, chances are you can meet this person. And if the person remembered you for being humane, they would join your team much easier.
Agree with you on the feedback. This is very important, and also on the human point of view.
Thank you.
All right, then I see a comment from Sarah thanking you for the presentation, that it was very useful. So thanks, Sarah, for the comment. I'm gonna take this moment as like people were happy with the presentation, but there are no more questions. I assume they're happy with the insights, but no questions about this are around. So so I'm gonna start wrapping up all this presentation. Thank you, Vitaly, for spending all this time with us, sharing your insights with us. And yeah, maybe looking forward to see the next presentation that you give in our meetup.
Thank you so much.
And yeah.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And thanks everyone who watched.
And for the ones who will watch the video, yeah.
Yes, true. Thank you.
And I will now share my screen again.
Mm-hmm.
I just need to learn how to properly. Where is the screen that I want to share? Okay. Okay, let's share everything. And let's move to the slides. We're gonna have to edit this in the video. Anyway, thank you again, Vitaly, for this. I hope people find insights that are interesting for you all while watching the video. And if you liked it, then leave us a comment or share this with your colleagues. And before wrapping up the meetup, let me share with you the next event we have in about a bit more than 1 month. We're going to have Federico Toledo from Abstracta. Federico is one of the key persons in testing in Latin America. Federico created a book that many of us in Latin America have read. So there is like so much knowledge this person has, and he has built a career on testing. He created a company for it. So Abstracta is one of the biggest companies in the American continent, from north to south, like basically spots in every single country in the American continent. So, and this is thanks to the knowledge he has built and the different connections he has made. Circling back to the recruiting and making connections in different places. So there is a lot of knowledge he has, and he is now sharing insights in terms of Gen AI and all this world of LLMs. So I really recommend you to have a look at it. It will be next September 18 at 7 p.m. This time zone, the European time zone. So maybe it will be the afternoon for you, or the early or the late evening for you, maybe if you're in India, for example. But I really recommend you to tune and listen to Federico, to what he has to say. And having said that, we're looking forward to see you in the next CTM online. Thank you all for being here. Have a good day and enjoy the rest of your day. And I hope you rest for the coming days and have a nice summer. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.